Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Gaara didn't need to look to know Sasuke was there. He'd felt him long before the Uchiha even stepped into range. Unlike the previous night, when Sasuke had surprised both Sakura and the Sasuke'S, this time he made his presence known. Intentionally. But Gaara didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on Chiyo's grave, expression unreadable. He would wait. Let Sasuke make the first move. Even as the Uchiha's feet sank into the freezing sand, dew still clinging to the earth beneath the rising sun, Gaara stayed rooted. Intimidation had never suited him, and it never would. Not that Sasuke could afford to strike him. Doing so would mean war between Konoha and Suna. And Naruto would never forgive him for that. No, Sasuke knew better. Especially with Kankuro watching close by, and Naruto just beyond, hidden but undoubtedly alert. Gaara almost smirked. Did Naruto truly not trust his old teammate enough to let him out of his sight? Or was he worried Sasuke might actually betray the peace they had all fought so hard for? The sand shifted, then settled. Sasuke stopped directly behind him. Still, Gaara didn't turn. There was something Sasuke wanted. If not, he wouldn't have come. Maybe he'd come to scold him, or challenge him to a friendly duel over Sakura. Whatever the reason, Gaara had made his peace with it. Because the moment he realized he loved her, he'd also realized he was ready to go head to head with the Uchiha. Sasuke stared at the Sasuke's back with cold, calculating eyes. The boy who once played with bloodied sand had built himself a kingdom, firm, tall, and seemingly unshakable. He'd reinforced his foundation with water, carefully crafting every grain to hold steady. But the moment he touched what belonged to Sasuke, the entire thing began to crumble. That fragile sandcastle would fall. Every tower carved just for Sakura would shatter. Sasuke would see to it. He had always been a bully when it came to things that mattered. And so he came, at dawn, to confront the red-haired Sasuke who had dared to lay claim to something Sasuke had tried so desperately to protect. Sasuke's fingers curled into a fist. The desire for blood was rising. Gaara felt the killing intent behind him. But he didn't flinch. His gaze remained on the grave. If Sasuke wanted to talk, why hadn't he said anything? Silence wouldn't get them anywhere. So Gaara spoke. As your friend, he said softly, I apologize for betraying your trust. Sasuke said nothing. He stared at Gaara's unmoving back, noting the slow rise and fall of his shoulders. But as your rival, Gaara continued, I have nothing to apologize for. Still no reply. Sasuke was tempted to scoff. Rival. Gaara was flattering himself. His only rival had ever been Naruto. A child who played in sand couldn't compare to an Uchiha. Hey. Too scared to look me in the eye? Sasuke scoffed slowly. Gaara closed his eyes, amused. Was that really all Sasuke had? Childish jabs. Naruto had warned him about the sarcasm, but this was almost disappointing. I'm paying my respects, he replied coolly. Sakura holds Chiyo Basama dear to her heart. His eyes opened. And so do I. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. Was Gaara trying to imply that their shared grief meant something? That it bonded them? Ah, he said sarcastically. But Chiyo Basama's not the only one you hold dear. Gaara finally turned. Their eyes met. Teal and crimson. No blinking, no retreat. I love her, Gaara said plainly. The breeze lifted the edges of Sasuke's hair. Can you say the same? Gaara asked. Sasuke stared back, challenged. That kiss Gaara had stolen, it burned like a brand. Interesting, Sasuke sneered. Coming from a thief. This, Gaara replied flatly, coming from a traitor. A hit. Even Sasuke had to acknowledge the truth of it. He was venomous, toxic, slithering like a snake. And yet, Gaara's eyes shifted toward his brother. Kankuro didn't laugh. Sasuke's smirk faltered. This is a genjutsu, Gaara continued, voice calm. It's been one since we locked eyes. He was right. Sasuke had placed Kankuro under an illusion the moment he arrived. From his perspective, Gaara was still kneeling, unmoving. As for Naruto, he'd left him out of the illusion entirely. Let him watch. Let him wonder. There are two reasons you'd use genjutsu, Gaara said. Either you came to attack, or you came to talk. If I wanted you dead, Sasuke said, stepping forward, you would be. Gaara's eyes turned sharp. Jealousy doesn't suit you. Sakura doesn't suit you, Sasuke snapped. Gaara folded his arms, mirroring Sasuke's posture. What do you want? He asked. Since you haven't struck me down, talk. Your interference is unnecessary, Sasuke said calmly. Your protection is unnecessary. Your love, he smirked, has been rejected. He stepped closer. And as for last night, I applaud your timing. His smirk vanished. But the one who will kiss away her tears, is me. Each step sank into the sand, closer and closer. The one who caused her pain is the one who must heal it, Sasuke ground out. Her love belongs to me. He stopped. They were nearly nose to nose. I won't threaten you. I won't tell you to stay away, because we both know I can't touch you without risking war. He leaned closer. But even if you steal her heart, even if she chooses you. The Mangekyo flared, the world turning red and black. I will take her back. 1,000 times over. She is mine. And then his voice softened. And I am hers. Gaara's heart thundered in his chest. Fear. Real fear, for the first time in years. Then the illusion broke. Kankuro stood at his side, blinking as if waking from a dream. You need me to take care of him? He asked, casual but ready. Or are you two just gonna keep staring? Gaara didn't answer. He turned toward Sasuke, who had already begun to walk away. Gaara-sama, Matsuri asked, watching the cage as he stood on the balcony. I'm here to give my report. Gaara didn't move from his position as he stared at Team 7 walk out of Suna, slipping through the crack with their faces toward the sun. It had been an awkward departure, what with Sakura leaning in to hug Gaara and Sasuke immediately turning to leave, grabbing her hand and yanking her along with him before she could wrap her arms around the cage. After exchanging a few awkward handshakes with Sai and Naruto, Gaara went to the balcony to watch them leave. He gripped the railing tightly. So this is what rejection felt like. Leave it in my office, he finally replied, closing his eyes and greeting the morning sun. Matsuri frowned behind him and rubbed her arm awkwardly. Should she say something to him? He must have been hurting over Sakura. Should she comfort him? She scratched her cheek anxiously. He probably hadn't been comforted in a long time. You're still here, Gaara said simply, not turning to look at her. Why you didn't tell me to leave, she said, nervously. Gaara was quiet. He still had a chance with the pink-haired kunoichi. There was a shot that Sasuke wouldn't be able to give her the love she deserved. He numbly reached for the engraving on his forehead. The symbol for love. Did he even have the right to bear it? Here he was, almost wishing that Sakura would run to him instead of Sasuke. Did he really have the right to love her after feeling such jealousy and envy? What was love? Was it the torrent of emotions he felt when standing in her presence? Or was it the heartbreaking moments Sakura cried? Was it the happy times she spent with the redhead? Or was it the pain of watching Team 7 leave his village? He clenched his jaw. Emotions. Matsuri's gaze snapped to attention. Emotions are like. He narrowed his eyes and frowned. Emotions brought pain and sorrow. Emotions caused jealousy and war. It was what made him try so desperately in his childhood to kill for Tsunagaku. It was what made him watch Sakura leave with pain in his heart. Sometimes it's unbearable, Matsuri said gently, walking up beside him and standing there, watching the rays of sun peek out from over the cliffs. And sometimes they're just painful. Gaara's chest tightened and he winced, clutching the cloth covering his chest. He had remembered doing the same thing when he was just a young boy and asking his uncle about feelings and pain. But, Matsuri said, a small, sad smile on her face, other times they're wonderful. She swallowed. Happiness isn't so hard to get, once you know where to look for it. Gaara-sama, I really do believe, she tilted her head back and smiled cheerfully at him. You will find happiness. Gaara looked at her, shocked at first. His eyes were wide in surprise. But then they softened at the corners. Yes, emotions were powerful things. He glanced at Matsuri. Don't you have a report to file? Hi, G. Gaara-sama. She said hurriedly, her cheeks turning bright red and speeding back toward the stairs. Gaara sighed at her antics and looked back to the rising sun. And then he smiled. Haruno Sakura could feel the weight of Uchiha Sasuke's gaze burning into the back of her head as they moved through the desert. With Naruto and Sai taking point and Sasuke falling behind to cover the rear, she felt stranded, cut off from the others, her thoughts loud in the silence. Normally, she would have been up front, chatting with Sai or racing Naruto under the blazing sun, laughing at their antics. But ever since last night, she hadn't uttered a word. Not to Sasuke. Not even to Gaara. Not really. She had barely managed a farewell to the cage, her face still burning from the memory of trying to hug him goodbye, an awkward gesture she had instantly regretted when Sasuke yanked her back like she was some kind of delinquent. She had wanted to disappear into the sand then. Crawl into one of the many caves they passed, dig a hole, bury herself. Anything to escape the shame and confusion swirling in her chest. Now, under the unrelenting heat, her body was moving, but her mind was trapped in that moment. And in the one before it. The one where she'd almost said too much. Or maybe not enough. Wait here, Naruto said abruptly, his tone clipped. Sasuke, guard Sakura. I see something up ahead. He glanced at Sai. Cover me. In a blur of movement, the two disappeared, racing toward whatever Naruto had seen. Sasuke stepped in front of her without hesitation, his stance rigid, protective, focused. Broad shoulders squared, eyes scanning the horizon. Just the two of them now. Sakura swallowed. Her throat was dry, but not just from the heat. Was she supposed to say something? Apologize. Explain. Ask if he was angry. Did she even want to know? Sasuke, she finally managed, voice barely above a whisper. Aye. Quiet, he said sharply, eyes never leaving the distance. Right. Now wasn't the time. She clenched her fists, feeling useless and foolish. Still, she couldn't help staring at his back, strong, steady, always just out of reach. She hated staring at backs. Ever since she'd cut her hair, she'd promised herself she wouldn't be the girl left behind again. And yet, here she was. Being protected. Like she was some fragile thing. Shoot. Sasuke muttered, tension suddenly rippling through his posture. Get in. What? Sakura blinked, confused. Get in where? Then she saw it. A wall of sand building in the distance, stretching high into the sky, barreling toward them like a beast unchained. A full-blown sandstorm. Before she could react, Sasuke grabbed her wrist, pulling her forward with startling urgency. This way. They sprinted toward the cliffside. A narrow cave yawned open just ahead, almost hidden if you didn't know what to look for. They dove inside just as the storm hit. Wind screamed past the opening, dragging grains of sand in with every gust. The air outside howled, drowning out all other sounds. Sandstorm, Sakura breathed, an alarm surging in her chest. Naruto and Sai. They're fine, Sasuke said evenly, already kneeling down and striking a small fire with practiced hands. Sakura hovered by the entrance, biting her lip, watching the sand swirl beyond the cave mouth. When Sasuke reached out and tugged her gently down beside him, she didn't resist. There was nothing they could do until the storm passed. She lowered herself beside him, cross-legged, knees brushing his. For a moment, there was only silence, the low crackle of flame, the muted roar of sand outside, and the sound of her own heartbeat. She looked up at him, her eyes soft, uncertain. And that's when it hit them both. They were alone. Truly alone. No teammates. No distractions. No missions. No excuses. Just the two of them. And all the words left unsaid. How long do you think you can keep this up? Sai asked, tilting his head to glance up at the blonde ninja beside him. Naruto offered a sheepish grin, one hand rubbing the back of his neck. As much as I'd love to take credit for the sandstorm, he let out a nervous chuckle as a bead of sweat slid down his temple. Yeah, that's all courtesy of good ol' Mother Nature. Sai blinked slowly. I see. He flicked at the corner of his sketchpad, lips tugging into a thoughtful frown. So this storm could last 5 minutes, Naruto said, his tone growing more serious. Or 3 days. Sai's eyebrow twitched. Ah, so unpredictable. Naruto gave a small shrug. Nature doesn't care about our plans. And Sakura and Sasuke, they will have time to themselves, Naruto said with a confident nod. We'll still go through with the plan, it's just, I can't exactly schedule the weather. Sai exhaled slowly and glanced down. His sandaled feet sank slightly into the cool, sandy floor as he adjusted his position and perched his sketchpad on his lap again. Well, he muttered, so much for all that careful strategy. Luckily, he wasn't entirely out of options. He glanced up at the ceiling where one of his tiny ink bats clung upside down, its beady little eyes blinking back at him. He still had eyes on the possible caves. Just in case. Sakura's been off this morning, Sai commented, brush poised over paper. Naruto's brows drew together, but he wasn't surprised. Sai had a sharp eye, even if he didn't always understand emotion. Yeah, Naruto said, gaze drifting to the swirling sand outside the mouth of the cave. Maybe Gaara had a little more influence on her than we thought. Sai frowned. I tried switching up her schedule, less overlap with him, but clearly, that didn't help. Naruto coughed awkwardly. Yeah, well, emotions don't follow a schedule. Outside, the wind howled, rattling loose pebbles against the stone. Sai began dragging his brush across the paper in slow, deliberate strokes. Would that be considered fate? He murmured aloud, eyes fixed on the page, or destiny? Naruto leaned back against the cave wall and winced as something sharp jabbed into his shoulder. He shifted. Depends, he said, voice quieter now. Fate and destiny. They're just words. It's how you see the situation that matters. Whether it's a burden or an opportunity, that's up to you. Sai dipped his brush again, slowly sketching the delicate curve of a dove's wing. He shaded the feathers into clouds, blending them so one faded into the other. He hummed softly, nose wrinkling as he considered. Then he glanced at Naruto. Sasuke and Sakura, would you say they're fate or destiny? Naruto looked away for a moment, then back at him with a quiet, knowing smile. Maybe a little of both, he said. After everything they've been through, that red string between them must be pretty frayed. But it's still there, tied tight. Sai actually smiled. Fate and destiny, he echoed, tone light and musing. He gently closed his sketchpad and slid it back into his black bag, careful not to wrinkle the fresh page. Such interesting concepts. He turned his gaze to the storm outside, watching it dance across the desert in violent, graceful waves. I wonder how they're doing there. Sasuke's eyebrow twitched as the sound of the wind howled outside the cave. The sandstorm had sealed them in, and for the moment, they were safe. He could hear every shift of Sakura's breathing beside him, uneven, nervous. They had food, water, fire. They could last a few days here, if it came to that. He turned his head just enough to catch her expression in the flickering firelight. She was biting her lower lip, her brows drawn in guilt and uncertainty. He sighed. Reaching over, he slid his arm around her shoulder, pulling her gently against his side. She resisted slightly, her body tensing. Sasuke frowned. Why weren't they together now? Sakura, he murmured, his voice low and near her ear, what's going on in that head of yours? She shifted under his arm, pulling away from his hold. That subtle retreat stung more than he expected. He didn't like the distance. What's wrong? He asked, sharper now, his gaze steady and unreadable. She turned to face him, and his heart sank. Her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. Had she been holding them back this entire time? His frown deepened. Was it something I did? She dug her feet into the cool sand, her gaze falling to the fire. The guilt bleeding from her eyes tugged at him harder than any words could. I'm sorry, Sasuke-kun, she whispered at last, voice trembling. He stared at her. Sorry. What the hell was she apologizing for? Gaara, she said slowly, he confessed to me. But I rejected him. Sasuke's jaw tensed. He suppressed the urge to scoff. Of course she did. Still, hearing it spoken aloud made something dark and possessive stir in his chest. I don't feel anything for him, she went on, her voice cracking. I love you. That did it. In one swift motion, he pulled her into his chest. Her tears soaked into his shirt as she pressed her face into him, shaking. I understand if you don't trust me anymore, she hiccuped. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I trust you, Sasuke said quietly, firmly. She blinked. What? You're here now, aren't you? He said, looking down at her with a faint smirk. If you wanted to stay in Sunagaker, you could have. But you didn't. Her breath caught. Then, you're not mad. Sasuke reached up and gently cupped her cheek, brushing his thumb across her flushed skin. A flicker of mischief danced in his eyes. On the contrary, he said smoothly, I'm furious. Before she could speak, he pressed her back against the cave wall, his body moving with the same precision he used on the battlefield. His lips found her neck, trailing slow, deliberate kisses up the curve of her throat. His breath was warm against her ear. That damn cage, he murmured darkly. His hand slid around her waist, pulling her flush against him. His control was thinning, frayed by days of tension and sleepless nights. His fingers danced along the edge of her waistband, teasing. His voice dropped to a growl. He thought he could take what's mine. Sakura's breath hitched as her hands curled around his shoulders. We haven't had much time alone lately, she whispered. When do I get you all to myself again? Sasuke looked into her eyes, burning with equal parts longing and restraint. When we're back in Konoha, he promised, sealing her lips with his. Their mouths moved together, fire and heat and need. He tasted her desperation, her want, her need. It matched his own. His hands moved up her back, threading through her soft pink hair as their bodies pressed closer, igniting sparks that burned hotter than the desert outside. She broke the kiss, breathless, her hands guiding him to her lips. She kissed each of his fingers, slow and reverent, until she reached his index. She whispered, slipping the finger between her lips. Want, she twirled her tongue around it delicately, you. When her lips parted from his skin, Sasuke's eyes darkened, pupils blown wide with desire. His hands tangled in her hair again. Now, she murmured. He was ready to give her everything she asked for, until he saw it. Over her shoulder, perched silently on the jagged cave wall, was a small bat. Beady, ink-black eyes stared straight at them. His expression twisted with irritation. Sigh. He exhaled sharply, his mood sour. Annoying, he muttered. What? Sakura blinked up at him, still caught in the moment. I won't do this to you. Not here. Not like this. His voice was rough, restrained. He gently pulled his hand from her waistband. When I have you, I want no interruptions. Her disappointment was plain. It mirrored his own. But, he added, smirking as he traced the curve of her lower lip with his thumb, in 3 days, when we're in Konoha. He leaned closer, whispering against her mouth. You'll be mine. Sakura couldn't help but smile. She and Sasuke had spent the better part of the night wrapped in quiet companionship. No words had been necessary, just the comfort of presence, the soft cadence of breathing, the warmth of skin against skin. Affectionate touches flowed freely between them, unspoken but deeply understood. There was no rush, no pressure, just them. So when she woke to find his eyes watching her, softened by morning light and something achingly tender, a flush immediately crept up her neck and spread across her cheeks. Good morning, she whispered, voice still thick with sleep. Good morning, Sasuke replied, his voice low and rough, gravel and smoke in the echo of the cave. Sakura turned her gaze to the entrance, where golden grains of sand whipped fiercely through the narrow opening, a curtain of wild light and wind. The sandstorm's still going strong, she murmured. Sasuke shifted slightly, craning his neck to look without moving too far from her. So it is. She began to inch away from him, still unsure how to navigate the space between them now that their relationship had crossed from longing to something real, something claimed. But the moment she tried to slide out from under his arm, he stopped her. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him once more. Her breath caught as his hand splayed against the small of her back, fingers warm against her spine. Her heart thudded in her chest, relentless, familiar. A rhythm she was quickly learning to associate with him. Don't, he said simply. So she didn't. Instead, she nestled closer, letting herself relax into his warmth. Her fingers traced slow, idle patterns across the lean muscles of his bare chest, marveling at the contrast between his strength and his silence. His skin was warm against her fingertips, and the steady beat of his heart beneath her touch was grounding. As promised, the night had passed without them crossing any lines, though the temptation had lingered in every glance, every brush of skin. Their restraint had been mutual, though the tension still simmered just beneath the surface. It was there, in the way Sasuke's eyes followed her, in the subtle tightening of his hold, in the way their breaths synced without trying. Sakura's stomach swooped at the thought of what lay ahead, of finally being vulnerable with him, of bearing everything, body and soul. And yet, her determination remained. She wanted to hear him say it. I love you. She needed to know that what they shared was something deeper. Still, her body betrayed her, aching for his, for closeness, for more. Sasuke's lips found hers then, slow and deliberate, as if reading her mind. His kiss was warm and intoxicating, tasting faintly of fire and the smoke of oak. When his tongue gently sought entrance, she opened for him without hesitation. She didn't care that her hair was a mess of pink knots, laced with desert sand. She didn't care that her breath was uneven or that her cheeks were flushed. All she could focus on was the heat curling low in her belly, the feel of his hand pressing her closer, the way he kissed her like she was something precious. She tried to keep herself grounded, but her emotions surged, wild and uncontained. The urge to push him back, straddle him, and take what she wanted was so strong it made her dizzy. Sasuke pulled back, just barely, brushing his lips over hers in a whisper of a kiss. Patience, he murmured against her mouth, voice rough with restraint. Sakura clutched at his shoulder, her fingers curling into his skin. Her entire body was trembling with need, with anticipation, but the way he looked at her, the way his lips ghosted over her temple, calmed the swirling storm inside her heart. When he finally pulled away, he glanced past her and toward the entrance of the cave. The storm has passed. It's time to go. The office was unusually quiet, save for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the scratching of pen on paper. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows, casting long beams of gold across the stacked mission reports and Hokage files. Kakashi Hatake sat behind his desk, mask in place, single visible eye half-lidded in thought as he scribbled his signature onto yet another scroll. There was a knock at the door. Enter, Kakashi said without looking up. Shikamaru stepped inside, posture slouched, hands tucked into his pockets. Team 8 hasn't responded to any of our messages, he said, walking forward and dropping a report onto the desk. I'm getting worried. Kakashi finally looked up, lifting a brow. When was their last correspondence? 2 days ago, Shikamaru sighed. I don't have a good feeling about this. Kakashi leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly in consideration. Any news on the supplies? None. Shikamaru tapped the side of the scroll. We should send in reinforcements. Kakashi nodded. I think it's time to call in Team 7. Yeah, I figured. Shikamaru raked a hand through his hair. I'll send word as soon as we're done here. Is Team 7 out of Sunagakure yet? Kakashi blinked slowly. Last I checked. And judging by Naruto's last update, they're probably riding out a sandstorm together. Shikamaru muttered something under his breath about emotional complications in tactical environments. Kakashi smirked behind his mask. You'd be surprised how often emotions override strategy. Not surprised. Just annoyed. Shikamaru rubbed his temple. Mission planning already has enough variables. Add romantic tension and it gets messy. Kakashi offered. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered. Kakashi hummed, then turned thoughtful. Sakura's been under more pressure than she lets on. She's trying to juggle being a medic, a shinobi, and someone worth Sasuke's return. The two men fell into a short silence. Outside, the wind rustled against the glass panes of the Hokage Tower. Somewhere, a hawk cried above the village. Shikamaru finally spoke again. Do you ever think it's strange? He looked down at the scroll still sitting on the desk. How much of our time is spent fixing things we didn't break? Kakashi didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted to the photo frames on the far shelf. Old teammates, old students, old ghosts. Then he looked back at the man across from him. No, Kakashi said. That's just what it means to be part of the next generation. You don't clean up because it's fair. You clean up because you want the ones after you to have something better. Shikamaru exhaled, long and slow. Suppose I'll add that to my list of life lessons. Right under, don't argue with women holding scalpels, Kakashi added helpfully. A twitch of a smile tugged at Shikamaru's mouth. Good advice. Kakashi picked up the scroll and tapped it twice on the desk. Get a message out to Team 7 soon. I don't like that we haven't heard from Team 8. Will do, Shikamaru said, already turning toward the door. Uchiha Sasuke moved silently behind Sakura, his gaze fixed on her every motion. She leapt from tree to tree with practiced ease, the Uchiha fan emblazoned on the back of her shirt catching the intermittent shafts of sunlight that filtered through the dense canopy above. Her pink hair swayed with every motion, shorter now, shoulder length, yet still vivid and unmistakable. And so were her hips. His eyes followed the ripple of lean muscle under the fabric of her spandex shorts. Each jump made the tight contours of her body shift, strong, determined, deadly. She was focused on the mission ahead, but he was focused on her. A ghost of a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. She was driving him insane. Outwardly, though, he appeared the same, stoic, calm, controlled. He was still Uchiha Sasuke, and no amount of temptation would distract him from a mission. He was well aware of every presence in their formation, Naruto leading, Sakura just behind, and Sai to his right. He kept track of their chakra signatures, the pressure of their footfalls, their breath. But still, her body made for a very compelling rhythm to run to. With every bounce of that tight ass, his feet struck the bark below him in a steady cadence. It was distracting in all the ways he shouldn't allow. But this was her, Sakura. And he was too far gone to pretend he didn't care. From the corner of his eye, he caught a brief exchange, Naruto and Sai trading a look. Sasuke's smirk faded. His mind reeled back to the night before, to the way one of Sai's ink creations had suspiciously fluttered outside the cave they'd stayed in. Combined with the very convenient sandstorm Naruto had conjured to keep them trapped inside together, it was all becoming far too suspicious. And when the storm had ended so abruptly, just in time for Naruto and Sai to appear without a scratch, Sasuke said nothing. But he'd noticed. Of course he had. They knew. He narrowed his eyes, watching Sakura reach for a soldier pill and pop it into her mouth mid-stride. His jaw clenched. She was pushing herself too hard. She hadn't slept properly during their stay in Sunagaker, and last night they had split shifts to keep watch, each only getting a few hours at best. To anyone else, she looked perfectly composed. But Sasuke saw the slight stumble in her landing, the subtle change in her breathing, the faint strain in her chakra. She was exhausted. And it was his fault. Without a word, Sasuke came to a stop on the next branch. The others landed behind him, one after another. Sakura blinked. Sasuke. He didn't answer her. Instead, he looked directly at Naruto and said, "We rest." Naruto raised a brow, incredulous. "You're saying what now?" Sasuke didn't blink. "We rest." Naruto glanced at Sakura. She was panting quietly, her cheeks slightly flushed. Now that Sasuke had pointed it out, Naruto noticed it too, the way she stood with a little more weight on her left foot, the tension in her shoulders. He sighed. "Fine. We'll set up camp here for the night." Night fell fast, the sky darkening to a deep indigo as the last rays of sunlight bled away behind the trees. A light breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and the crackle of their small campfire pulsed in the quiet. The air smelled like pine, smoke, and lingering chakra residue. Sai had gone off in search of more firewood and something to eat, leaving Naruto and Sasuke alone with Sakura. Sakura slept soundly in Sasuke's lap, curled into him with the ease of someone who finally allowed herself to rest. Her cheek was pressed against his thigh, her breath warm and steady. Earlier, she'd whimpered, a soft sound that pierced right through him, and he had immediately brushed her forehead with his fingers until the tension eased and sleep reclaimed her. Now, she breathed evenly. Sasuke sat still, one hand in her hair, the other resting on the hilt of his blade. His Sharingan had long since faded, but his senses remained sharp. He didn't look up, didn't need to feel the weight of the gaze burning into him from across the fire. "Naruto." Sasuke met his stare, unflinching. "Tell me," he said, voice low and edged in warning. Naruto didn't play dumb. He exhaled, leaning back against the tree trunk with a tired groan. "Guess we're not cut out for covert ops." "Obviously," Sasuke muttered, fingers drifting lazily through Sakura's hair. "Why were you spying?" "We weren't spying," Naruto said, dragging a hand through his tousled blonde hair. "We were observing, keeping tabs." Sasuke's eyes twitched. "The sandstorm." Naruto gave a one-shouldered shrug, unapologetic. "Might have been my doing. Just helping you two figure things out. Call it strategic interference." Sasuke's voice turned sharp. "I don't need your help." "Yeah, well, the Hokage and the council seemed to think otherwise," Naruto shot back. At that, Sasuke went completely still. His fingers froze mid-stroke in Sakura's hair. "Kakashi has nothing to do with this. He's the Hokage theme," Naruto said, his voice firm. "And you're the last Uchiha. You think he's not going to keep an eye on who you're emotionally attaching yourself to? Especially if it's Sakura, top medical ninja, essential to village infrastructure. You two aren't just people anymore. You're assets." Sasuke let out a bitter laugh, short, sharp, humorless. "So it is about genetics," he muttered. "Breeding concerns." His voice turned venomous. "Fine. Then go ahead. Report that we're together." Naruto rolled his eyes. "You report it yourself, bastard." The fire crackled between them again, casting shadows across Naruto's face. The flicker of heat did nothing to warm the tension in the air. Then Naruto's voice dropped to something quieter. More serious. "It's not just Kakashi. The council's involved." Sasuke's eyes narrowed dangerously. "They're involved." Naruto hesitated. "Don't go psycho again, okay? But they're considering giving Sakura an official order." Sasuke's brows drew together. "An order for what?" Naruto shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking to the sleeping Kunoichi. "To initiate reproduction. With you." Sasuke paled slightly, his jaw tightening. "That's absurd. You know how they are," Naruto muttered. "Paranoid old bats are more concerned with bloodlines than basic decency." Sasuke's eyes returned to Sakura. Her expression, even in sleep, held traces of stress, fine lines near her eyes, a slight crease between her brows. "Is that why she's been off lately?" he asked. "Does she know?" Naruto nodded reluctantly. "Yeah, she's been trying to keep it together. But she's scared. She won't say it, but she is." Sasuke exhaled through his nose, something dark flickering in his gaze. She's going to need more from you, Naruto said. Something solid. A real promise. Sasuke nodded once, the motion slow. I know. Naruto studied him for a long moment. Just don't hurt her again, alright? Sasuke didn't answer immediately. He looked down at the woman curled up against him, the soft rise and fall of her chest, the way she instinctively nestled closer when the wind blew across her skin, as if sensing he was her warmth and safety even in sleep. He brushed a few strands of pink hair from her face, then looked up at Naruto. I won't. You hear about Ryo's injury? Jiro asked, arms folded behind his head as he leaned back against the guard post. The lazy crackle of torches flanking Konoha's outer gate cast flickering shadows on the stone wall behind him. Bunta, his partner for the night shift, yawned and grinned. Yeah, heard some genin accidentally nailed him in the ass with a kunai during target practice. He tipped his chair back, gazing up at the stars scattered like frost across the night sky. Amateur. Jiro chuckled, scratching at the patchy beard growing along his jaw. Says the man who got his butt handed to him by Konohamaru. What was it? Chakra smoke bomb. Had you laid out like a stunned fish? Yeah, Bunta muttered, waving him off. Crickets chirping, moon hanging high, and you're dragging up ancient history. It is dead out here, Jiro agreed, cracking his knuckles with a satisfied sigh. Peaceful night. Bunta reached into his flak vest and pulled out a small, round bottle of sake. The glass glinted in the firelight as he twirled it between his fingers. Jiro raised a brow. Seriously? We're off in an hour, Bunta said with a shrug, popping the cap with his thumb. Nothing's happened all night. What's the harm in a little sip? You know we're not supposed to drink on duty. Bunta tilted the bottle teasingly toward him. Come on. Who's gonna find out? Jiro hesitated, arms folded, but the grin tugging at his lips betrayed him. You're a bad influence. Bunta smirked. That's what my mom says. With a resigned laugh, Jiro reached for the bottle. But just as his fingers wrapped around the neck of the flask, the ground gave a subtle jolt beneath them. The sake rippled inside the bottle, the surface trembling. Jiro froze. Did you feel that? Bunta blinked. Feel what? Before Jiro could answer, a second tremor rippled through the earth, stronger this time. A muffled crash echoed from the woods beyond the gate, low and distant, but unmistakable. That, Jiro growled, already rising to his feet. His eyes narrowed toward the shadows just beyond the torchlight, hand instinctively going to the kunai at his hip. Bunta stood too, less graceful, fumbling for the shuriken pouch strapped to his thigh. His earlier smugness was gone now, replaced by wide-eyed concern. Ah, man, he muttered. Stay sharp, Jiro murmured. Something's out there. The guards moved in sync, stepping quietly beyond the gate and scanning the dark treeline. Though Konoha had been quiet for years, especially since the last Great War, any disturbance now set their nerves on edge. Bunta, Jiro said, voice low, you hear that? Bunta nodded, his pudgy fingers twitching around the shuriken. Yeah, he gulped. I did. Jiro's gaze locked onto a thick bush to the right. There. Without hesitation, Bunta flicked his wrist, sending the shuriken sailing into the shadows with a whisper of steel. A rustle. A thud. Jiro lunged, leaping high before twisting midair, landing on the opposite side of the bush to flank the target. Bunta, he called, brow lifting as he crouched. What the? He reached in and pulled out a small, limp body by the ears. A rabbit. A rabbit. Jiro stared at it in disbelief, then let out a booming laugh. All that for a dumb bunny. Bunta shuffled closer, brow furrowed. Huh, guess it was a false alarm. If it's just a rabbit, we don't have to report it, Jiro said, dangling the animal by the ears. You up for stew? But before Bunta could respond, a deeper rustling sounded behind them, followed by a low, anguished moan. The rabbit hit the dirt. In its place, Jiro had his blade drawn in an instant, spinning toward the source of the sound. A foul scent curled through the air, rank and metallic. It clung to their senses, thick and unmistakable. Bunta gagged. What the hell is that smell? They moved together, crouching low and silent. Jiro reached out, brushing his fingers along the forest floor, dark, sticky. Blood. Lots of it. Jiro's voice came low, sharp with urgency. Alert the Hokage. Bunta didn't argue. He was already running. If we take this road, it'll cut our distance in half, Sai said, pointing toward the dirt path that stretched like a brown ribbon through the trees, leading straight toward Konoha's outer borders. Sasuke crossed his arms, his voice cool and unwavering. It's too exposed. Taking the trees is safer. Sakura sighed, glancing up at the blazing noonday sun. They'd been stuck in this debate for what felt like an hour, and it was driving her mad. Road or trees, it was all the same to her. Team 7 could handle whatever came their way. They weren't rookies anymore. But Sasuke, in true overprotective form, stood his ground like he always did. And Naruto. The idiot had dozed off in a tree. Sakura threw her hands up. This is ridiculous. Why are we even fighting about this? Just take the damn trees next to the road and call it a compromise. No, Sai and Sasuke said in perfect unison. She let out a groan and turned toward the snoozing blonde. Naruto. Let's just go. Naruto cracked open an eye and grinned down at her. I thought you'd never ask. But just as he shifted to leap down, something caught his eye, a flicker of wings against the blue sky. A black hawk, flying fast, its talons clutching a sealed parcel. The Konoha crest was stamped on its breast. Naruto's grin faded. That's a messenger hawk. He leapt up instead of down, climbing higher into the tree canopy to intercept the bird. As if timed perfectly, the hawk released the scroll mid-flight, and Naruto caught it mid-air before landing lightly on a branch. It's urgent, he called down. And, it's addressed to you, Sakura-chan. He tossed the scroll to her, landing beside her with a quiet thud. Sakura caught it with practiced ease, her brows furrowed as she unraveled the seal. The others, Sasuke and Sai, drew closer, the earlier tension forgotten in the shadow of whatever message the hawk had carried. She read it quickly, then stopped. Her hands trembled. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her voice came in fragments. Kiba and Shino, she whispered, eyes wide, there. Sasuke was at her side in an instant. He hated the way her voice broke. Hated the tears that welled in her eyes. Whatever was in that scroll, it had just changed everything. He took it gently from her fingers and scanned it, his eyes narrowing. Kiba and Shino are near death, he said, his voice clipped, but steady. They were found in critical condition, ambushed during a mission in Tsuchi no Kuni. Hinata. He stopped. His pupils contracted. She's missing. What? Naruto's voice cracked, a rare flash of fear in his tone. Hinata's. She's gone. Sasuke looked up at him. This isn't just a medical emergency anymore. It's a rescue mission. We're heading for the land of Earth. Sakura's brows drew together in a deep frown. What was she even doing in Tsuchi no Kuni? Sasuke didn't answer right away. His gaze slid toward Naruto, who was now clutching the scroll with white-knuckled fingers, his eyes scanning it again and again like the words might rearrange into something less devastating if he stared hard enough. Sai, unusually somber, was the one to speak. The medical supplies you ordered last month, some of them were stolen. A shipment never made it past the border. Sakura's head jerked toward him, eyes wide. What? Why didn't anyone tell me? Kakashi didn't want to worry you, Sai replied evenly. He thought it would be a routine retrieval, send in a small team to track the thieves and secure the crates. Hinata was enlisted to assist, tracking is one of her team's specialties, after all. But it's turned into something more, Sakura murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mind raced. Hinata had been on missions with her before. She was precise, quiet, and skilled. For something to go this wrong. She shook her head. But why? Why my medical supplies? Sai's jaw tightened. They weren't stolen at random. Someone wanted them. The ambush wasn't coincidental. Sasuke stepped forward, his voice low and clipped. That's not important right now. Sakura looked at him sharply, but he met her gaze without flinching. What matters is that we find her, Sasuke said, alive. Sakura hadn't moved, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, head bowed. But she finally looked up at Naruto, whose face had gone pale. She reached out and rested a hand on his shoulder. We'll find her, I promise. Naruto nodded, slowly at first, then with growing conviction. And without another word, Team 7 turned toward the horizon. Their path, their purpose, now crystal clear. Hinata was missing, and they were going to bring her home. We need more blood, stat. Tsunade's voice cracked through the chaos of the operating room as she pressed her glowing hands against Kiba's chest, chakra surging in frantic pulses. Somebody covers Shino's 6, I can't hold both of them. Monitors beeped in uneven rhythm, a grim symphony to the blood smeared across the floor. The medics moved quickly, but not quickly enough. For the love of, Tsunade shouted, her eyes wild. Can someone start stitching Kiba before I lose him? Outside the reinforced glass, Kakashi stood in stunned silence. Kakashi closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, trying to keep his calm. The taste of iron, panic, sat heavy in his mouth. Hinata had not been found. Not with Kiba, not with Shino, not even with Akamaru. Nobody. No blood trail, no sign. And yet, Kakashi had a gut feeling. He knew who was behind this. The rogue ninja they'd been tracking for weeks, elusive, precise, and now, apparently, personal. Footsteps approached quietly, almost reluctantly. Shikamaru came to a stop beside him, arms crossed, gaze trained through the glass. Any updates? He asked, voice low. None, Kakashi murmured. Shikamaru was quiet for a moment. Team 7's on the move, I take it. They've been given direct orders, Kakashi confirmed. Shikamaru's eyes flicked toward Naruto, who stood stone still like a statue chiseled from heartbreak. Naruto'll get her back, he said. You know that. Kakashi's jaw tensed. I know. Then what's got you looking like the sky just fell? Kakashi hesitated, watching as Tsunade shouted another order and a medic sprinted past, coated in sweat and blood. I worry for Naruto, he said softly. The last time Hinata was taken. He tore through an army to bring her home, Shikamaru finished, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. And he'll do it again. Kakashi didn't return the smile. That's what I'm afraid of. You're not getting anything out of me, Hinata hissed, blood soaking into the blindfold tied tight around her eyes. The steady stream from her torn temples was warm, wet, and constant, but her voice held. Oh, I don't need your eyes, came a voice, low, sharp, and dripping with disinterest. So I slashed them. She flinched as cold fingers lifted her chin, tilting her head toward the source of the voice. She could feel his breath, humid and wrong, brush across her face. And I don't need your information, either, he murmured, his lips nearly brushing hers. So what do you think happens to the next thing I don't need? A pause. Shall I take your tongue, too? Hinata trembled, but lifted her chin higher. Do your worst. A sharp laugh cut the air, more like a bark than anything human. So full of pride, it's almost charming. His thumb brushed against her cheek, almost tender, until it wasn't. He pressed a mocking kiss to her lips, featherlight and revolting. She opened her mouth to bite him, but he pulled away at the last second with a soft task. Now, let's not be difficult. A cold hand slid from the nape of her neck downward. She gasped, jerking against her restraints, the heavy clank of iron echoing in the chamber as her wrists tore against the jagged chains. Pain lanced up her arms. Still, she pulled. Tell me, the voice whispered against her ear, what do you think I really want? Secrets from the leaf. His hand paused, fingertips digging into her collarbone. A message for your precious little Kyuubi husband. He leaned closer, his breath turning colder, darker. Or maybe, you. Hinata's breath hitched, her heart pounding in her ears like war drums. You're wasting your time, she spat. Perhaps, he said idly, but I do enjoy the process. She cried out as his grip tightened, bruising and cruel. Still, she didn't beg. Didn't scream. I wouldn't give him that. I suppose you believe Naruto will come for you, the man mused, stepping back, his boots echoing on the stone floor. Of course he will. That's the point. Hinata's whole body stiffened. Why do you think your comrades' bodies were planted so carefully outside your gates? He asked, voice like silk over broken glass. They were the message. You, Uzumaki Hinata, are the invitation. She felt her stomach churn. You're a trap, he said with a sigh, almost wistful. A beautiful one, but a trap nonetheless. He let the silence hang before adding with a sneer, pity. You don't get me hard at all. Hinata felt herself release a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her muscles slackened in momentary relief. But I know a few rogues from Omegakure who aren't so particular. Hinata didn't speak. She couldn't. Her lips trembled, but she locked her jaw. Somewhere, deep within, she clung to one truth. One lifeline. Naruto was coming. And when he did, this man wouldn't be laughing. Naruto had never been one for fancy words. He constantly failed essay writing in school and could barely keep up with Kiba in class. And even that was a miracle for him. He preferred to tell things like they were. He liked to keep things simple. While he wasn't exactly great at writing, he sure as hell could make a speech. He could talk no jutsu the shit out of people. He was always able to lift others' spirits. He was the sunlight in the darkness. So the question he constantly asked himself was this: who would be there to lift his spirit up? And time again, the beautiful Hyuga girl would remind him that she was there for him. That his life was not his own. Time and time again, she would show her love for him. In her eyes, he could see forever. He pressed his feet deep into the ground and kept running. Even in sage mode, it seemed he couldn't go fast enough. He was sure he had cut his time in half by speeding through the forest, but it just felt like he was being torn further apart from Hinata. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't seem to reach her. He ground his teeth together. Hinata, I won't let you lay another finger on Naruto. The same girl who had risked her life to save his on countless occasions. What are you doing here? The same woman who had stayed by his side, even when he wasn't looking. Get out of here. She was his friend. You're no match for his lover. I know. His wife. I'm just being selfish. But Hinata had never been selfish. What are you talking about? What are you doing here? It's dangerous. Not in Naruto's eyes. I'm here of my own free will. She was pure and good. I used to cry and always give up. Kind and generous. I nearly went the wrong way. She was everything he wasn't. But you. And she was everything he was. You showed me the right way. Hinata was his light during times of darkness. I was always chasing you. She was his beacon of hope. Wanting to overtake you. Oh, but she already had. She had complete control over his mind, body, and soul. I just wanted to talk with you. She was his. I wanted to be with you. And he was hers. You changed me. But she had changed him. Your smile saved me. And her smile saved him. Naruto tried to keep the memory away, but it pushed forward to the front of his mind. How she jumped out to save him from pain, standing in front of him, never taking her eyes away from her possible death, all the while telling him just how much she loved him. And then immediately proving it over and over again, no matter how much torture she had to go through. She was the light to his darkness. She gave him courage and support when no one else could. She was the love he had always had, but never acknowledged, until it was almost too late. Almost too late. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Hinata had been willing to sacrifice herself for him. She didn't care what she had to do to protect him. And Naruto. Naruto would do the same. He pounded his feet into the ground, pushing himself as hard as he could go as he led Team 7 to Tsuchi no Kuni. He wouldn't stop. He wouldn't rest. Not until he found her. And then. So I'm not afraid to die protecting you. He would tear whoever hurt her to shreds. Because I love you. Now and forever. Thanks for handling this, Tsunade-sama. Ino exhaled, her chakra flaring softly as she stabilized Kiba's vitals. The fifth Hokage worked beside her, stitching up a deep gash in his thigh with practiced ease. We were supposed to have more staff, but one of our younger doctors went Mia and Sakura's out. Tsunade didn't pause, though the irritation in her voice was unmistakable. When is Sakura coming back? Ino winced and sweat dropped. Straight to the point, huh? She let out a weary sigh and motioned for a nearby nurse to dab at her forehead. She's out chasing the ones responsible for this mess. The ones responsible for doing this to Shino, Kiba, Akamaru, Hinata. Tsunade frowned, her stitches tightening just slightly. So that means you're in charge. The sweat drop slid further down Ino's temple. Of course, Tsunade wasn't thrilled. Ino knew this. Hell, if their positions were reversed, she wouldn't have been thrilled either. She wasn't Sakura. She knew it. Tsunade knew it. The whole hospital knew it. But damn it, she was doing her best. For now, Ino said simply, suctioning away the excess blood from Kiba's leg. Tsunade gave a soft, unimpressed hum. Then, with one final tug, she finished the last suture and tied it off. Good luck. Ino stared at her, blinking. This was Tsunade, the same woman who had once driven Sakura to collapse after a single training session. The same woman who could terrify half the hospital staff with a single glare. Yet here she was, calm. Smirking even. Was this support? But the glint in Tsunade's eyes said otherwise. That smirk wasn't kindness. It was a warning. You're gonna need it. Great. Ino muttered with a nervous laugh. Thanks. But, Sakura should be back once they find Hinata. I won't be in charge for long. Tsunade nodded, though her gaze darkened. As competent as Ino was, Tsunade had only ever trusted one person to run her hospital in her absence. She hadn't passed the torch to just anyone. Her fingers lingered on Kiba's skin. She frowned. These marks, she murmured, leaning in. They're not slashes. They're fingerprints. Ino paused mid-healing. A direct assault. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. She hovered over the wound, now closed but still deep purple around the edges. Whoever did this didn't just want to kill them. They wanted them to suffer. The tearing, it wasn't done with weapons. These injuries were inflicted by bare hands. Ino swallowed hard, glancing at Shino's motionless form. Who does that? Someone who enjoys it, Tsunade replied grimly. Someone is sick. Sadistic. Her brow furrowed even deeper. She'd seen wounds like these before. A long time ago. But not from a scalpel. This was more visceral, more personal. She didn't say the name on her tongue, Orochimaru. No, it wasn't his style. His terror was clinical, cold. This was raw brutality. Should we be worried? Ino asked hesitantly. I mean, Team 7's strong, but. Sakura is my student, Tsunade snapped, more sharply than intended. Then, softening slightly, she added, they'll be fine. Ino bit her lip and turned back to Shino, channeling chakra into his chest wound. She didn't question Sakura's strength. Not for a second. But Hinata, after what she'd seen done to Kiba and Shino, and Akamaru's mangled condition. Hope was harder to hold on to. You don't think they're holding Hinata for ransom, do you? She asked quietly. Tsunade didn't answer at first. Then said, it's a possibility. But let's be honest, do you really think Naruto would let that happen? Ino gave a small shake of her head. I don't even want to think about how he's holding up. Tsunade let out a bitter, humorless laugh. I'm sure he isn't. Ino felt her throat tighten. Her friends had been through so much. And yet, it just kept coming. Pain, war, death, loss. But there was no time to mourn. Not yet. That's why we need to heal these two, Tsunade said quietly, eyes fixed on Shino's bruised torso. Fast. Ino blinked away the sting in her eyes. Her fingers pressed deeper into Shino's arm, isolating the infection and burning it out with careful chakra. Her movements were sharp, controlled, efficient. She had to be. If Shino woke up, if he could talk, maybe they'd finally understand what the hell had happened. And maybe, just maybe, they'd still have time to save Hinata. Kiba stared at the ceiling with his one good eye open. His other, bandaged over and still sore from getting punched so hard, wouldn't do him much good. Still, he stared at the ceiling. He had already tried sitting up, only to be blocked by numerous casts and needles. Kiba laid back down, unsure about what to do. He was confused. Hadn't he just been in an intense battle? Where was Hinata? How in the hell did he get to the Konoha hospital? He glanced over to the bed next to his, watching Shino's heart monitor carefully. Shino was still breathing, luckily. With the injuries he had acquired, it was a miracle he was still alive. Kiba looked toward the foot of the bed, where Akamaru normally stayed. When he was younger, that pup used to greet him every morning with the lick of his toes and a happy bark that let Kiba know the sun was up. His surprise wasn't held back when he discovered the lack of his dog's weight at his feet. Akamaru? He asked, his voice coming out raspy. There was no response. Akamaru always came when Kiba called. Why didn't he hear those overly large, goofy feet pounding on the ground? Where was the barking he was so fond of? The licks and kisses that awoke him every time. Kiba's heart thumped hard. Akamaru. He called louder. Where are you? Meanwhile, Shino was glaring at his teammate through his dark shades from across the room. Wasn't he important too? Why didn't Kiba check on him first? Hell, even the nurses that had been in to check on them just an hour before didn't give him a damn thought. He slowly sat up, every bone in his body aching, listening to the bugs inside chatter away. At least they cared. Oh, Shino, Kiba said, looking over at his comrade. Shino smiled. Finally some recognition. Have you seen Akamaru? Shino nearly fell over. They had almost been killed, and he was worried about his dog. He adjusted his loose glasses and shook his head. No, he replied. But the nurses earlier said. The door burst open, and Shikamaru marched right in. Damn it, I told you, Ino, these two need constant monitoring. Ino huffed and folded her arms. We're short-staffed. Haruhi is out and Sakura normally handles all the. She stopped when she saw Kiba wide awake. His grin was cheeky, and he gave her a slight wave. Yo, he said. In 3 steps, she was by his side, and in 2 seconds, her hand had smacked him upside the head. You. She glared at him, but there was relief in her eyes. You little. Glad to see you're awake, Shikamaru said, stepping forward. Where's Akamaru? Kiba asked quickly, trying to look over their shoulders for some sign of his best friend. Ino and Shikamaru exchanged glances. Akamaru's okay, but where's Hinata? Shino asked. Shikamaru was surprised to see the bug master awake. He frowned. Worry etched the lines of his features, and his brain was working at high speed. If Shino didn't know where Hinata was. Ino clenched her fists. She could feel panic bubbling inside of her chest. The idea of losing yet another friend was impossible to her. What happened? Shikamaru asked quietly, hoping that Kiba would know where Hinata was. But Kiba's grin faded, and he stared at Shikamaru. An ice cube slid to the pit of his stomach as he watched the wisest person he knew fold his arms. So he repeated Shino's question, where's Hinata? Ino couldn't handle this anymore. Her chest was hurting too much, and she didn't have the support of Sai or Sakura to get her through this tough time. I'll go get the Hokage, Ino stammered, averting her gaze as she swiftly walked out. Shino watched her steadily. Shikamaru swallowed. His worst fears were just confirmed. Hinata was either dead or captured. And her being the wife of the Kyuubi holder meant that she was most likely going to be held as a hostage. I'm going to ask you again, Shikamaru said slowly, the look in his eyes a dead giveaway for the horror he was trying to hold back. What happened? Sasuke-kun. Karen cried, her voice high and eager as she launched herself at him. Her arms coiled tightly around his torso, cheek nuzzling him with exaggerated affection. I've missed you so much. Sasuke sighed, the sound more tired than annoyed. Get off, Karen. He stood slightly hunched from the unexpected weight clinging to him, his posture tilted as if exhaustion itself had taken physical form. The reunion felt anything but heartfelt to him. He didn't have the energy for sentimentality, certainly not this kind. It's been a while, huh? Suigetsu chimed in, his shark-toothed grin easygoing as he scratched the side of his nose. Still the same brooding asshole, I see. Jugo said nothing, but his presence spoke volumes. He hovered nearby, quiet and gentle as ever, a soft smile on his face, like seeing Sasuke had brought a kind of peace. Two small birds perched on his broad shoulders, unmoving and calm, as if even they sensed the importance of the moment. He didn't speak, but he didn't have to. Sasuke knew Jugo had missed him. Sakura watched from a short distance, a small, uncertain smile on her lips as Team Taka reunited before her eyes. As much as she hated to admit it, the sight always stirred something uncomfortable in her chest, a low ache of loneliness she tried not to acknowledge. They were a reminder of the time Sasuke had chosen to leave. A reminder of the path he'd taken without her. Back then, he'd thought she wasn't strong enough to follow him. And maybe he'd been right. Her hand drifted to her right arm, fingers curling tightly around her bicep. She had trained since then. Worked herself raw, bloodied her knuckles, learned to heal and destroy. She'd become strong, hadn't she? And yet that old feeling crept back in, the memory of helplessness, of standing on a darkened road with her hand outstretched, begging him to stay. Sakura bit her lip and turned her eyes away, toward Naruto and Sai, who stood talking in hushed tones near the edge of the clearing. Team Taka had been expecting them. Sasuke had sent word the moment they received the scroll, Hinata had vanished, and now they needed help finding her. We should start strategizing, Sakura said, her voice sharper than she intended, cutting through the chatter. The sooner we have a plan, the sooner we can bring Hinata back. Sasuke glanced at her, something unreadable in his eyes. Then let's rest while we plan, Karen said, adjusting her glasses with a prim little push. I made sukiyaki. Enough for everyone. Sakura's chest tightened again. She inhaled slowly, then exhaled the tension with a soft, weary smile. That sounds nice, she said quietly. Let's get to work, Naruto said, stepping forward. So you're saying Hinata was definitely taken? Shikamaru asked Kiba again, his voice low and tense. The strategist sat hunched on a stool meant for hospital staff, rubbing his temple as a dull headache bloomed behind his eyes. The pressure of uncertainty weighed on him like a vice. The only good news was that Hinata was likely still alive, whoever had taken her probably wanted something first. And Shikamaru had a gut feeling what that was. Naruto. Yeah, Kiba said grimly, eyes fixed on the thick white casts wrapping his legs. A bunch of freaky monsters grabbed her. Couldn't even smell 'em coming. Ninja using the cursed seal, Shino corrected, his voice quiet but firm. Shikamaru gave a short nod. That made sense. And if that were the case, there was only one logical next step. Shino, he said, glancing over. Do you still have a tracker bug on them? Shino didn't answer right away. A flicker of offense crossed his face. Bugs, really? His Kikaichu deserved more respect than that. Still, he closed his eyes, listening to the hum of chakra and life in his colony. Then he nodded once. They can find her. He glanced at Kiba. I keep a female Kikaichu on both you and Hinata. Always. Kiba's mouth fell open in horror. You put a flea on me. Shino's eyes narrowed. She's not a flea. Can we send your Kikaichu to inform Team 7 of her location? Shikamaru interrupted, raising an eyebrow, steering the conversation back to what mattered. Yes, Shino said, though his face tightened. But they're not fast enough to get there in time. We'll need to package them, have a hawk carry them. The idea clearly pained him. If the hawk got hungry, well, Shino thought, let's just hope it's well fed today. He glanced toward the window. The last thing he remembered before blacking out from blood loss was Hinata still fighting, her chakra flaring as she protected Kiba. An army had come down on them, and while the three of them were strong, damn strong, it hadn't been enough. His hand clenched in the blanket. Who did you send to retrieve her? He asked quietly. Shikamaru allowed a small, confident smirk to curl at the corner of his lips. Team 7. Kiba's eyes widened, his breath catching. A one-man unit couldn't handle an army, but this wasn't just anyone. This was Team 7. The original Team 7. If anyone can bring Hinata home, a calm voice said from the doorway, it's them. Kiba turned, craning his neck to look. He hadn't even smelled him coming. Kakashi. The Hokage leaned casually against the frame, arms crossed, but his eyes told a different story. Shadows rimmed them, not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of worry. We're dealing with an army enhanced by the curse seal, Shikamaru told him, gesturing toward Shino. He left a bug on Hinata. Female Kikaichu, Shino corrected again under his breath. And we're going to send a hawk with a few more to help track her down, Shikamaru finished, ignoring him. Kakashi nodded. Do it. I'll stay here. Shikamaru hesitated a moment before sighing. He stood and walked out the door, sliding it closed behind him. Kakashi moved slowly, settling onto the stool Shikamaru had vacated. His gaze swept over Kiba and Shino, both battered, both tense, both unsure what to say. I need to hear it directly, Kakashi said, voice low and unwavering. Tell me what happened out there. Kiba swallowed, throat raw. He'd already told the story once, but this time it felt heavier. Kakashi needed every detail. We followed Shino's tracker, Kiba began. It led us to a mountain pass near Iwa no Dokatsu. Kind of a dead-end canyon. We started infiltration at the base, Shino added, but it felt wrong. Like they were waiting for us. Then they came, Kiba said, his voice tight. Hundreds of them, all marked with the curse seal. Shino's fists clenched in the sheets. Hinata estimated at least 1,000. They swarmed out of the caves like they were part of the mountain. We fought. Kiba's jaw tightened. Of course, we fought. But it was like they were just playing with us. Kakashi's brow furrowed. 1,000? How many surviving cursed seal users? It shouldn't have been possible. Not unless Orochimaru was back to his old schemes again. Shino went down first, Kiba continued. I think they wanted to take him out early since he tracked them. He dropped hard. Before I blacked out, I saw them grab Hinata. They were headed north. Kakashi closed his eyes. So many of the old hideouts had been scoured. Sasuke had even helped him root out Orochimaru's old labs. They'd assumed the remnants were either dead or scattered. Had they simply been waiting? And why now? What condition was Hinata in? He asked, finally. Shino glanced at Kiba. Kiba's hands trembled as he gripped the sheet again, knuckling white. Bad, he said, voice cracking. Really bad. Was she conscious? Kakashi asked, more softly this time. Kiba shook his head. I don't know. And that was the part that haunted them most. They'd been unconscious for days before they were found. By now, Hinata had been with her captors far too long. And she'd been awake for all of it. And this is our room, Sasuke-kun. Karen squealed, her voice sharp and grating as she eagerly tugged at her unwilling comrade's arm. She practically skipped down the narrow hallway of the hideout Team Taka had been using for the past few years. Sasuke grimaced, clearly uncomfortable. Let go, Karen. But Karen pretended not to hear him, fingers tightening around his arm like a vice. Let me show you the washroom. I can wash your back later, if you want. Their voices trailed off as they disappeared down the hallway, echoing faintly past the dining room walls. Back at the table, the rest of the group ate in silence, what little appetite they had left slowly waning. The sukiyaki had been good, but none of them were in the mood for celebration. Especially not Sakura, who sat across from the seat Sasuke had vacated, her appetite thoroughly annihilated the moment Karen latched onto him like a leech. She could still hear her simpering laugh. Sakura shoved a mouthful of rice into her mouth with far more force than necessary. Karen, Sasuke's low voice echoed distantly. Put your clothes back on. Sakura's eyebrow twitched. Honestly. Jugo, seated calmly beside her, turned his head. Doesn't that bother you? She glanced at him, her motion stiff and mechanical. A twitching smile played across her lips. No, why would it? Jugo didn't respond, but Suigetsu let out a loud bark of laughter from across the table, clearly amused. He leaned back, a smug grin splitting his face, his sharp teeth flashing. Man, you're tough. I gotta say, I didn't think you'd hold out for this long, what with all the tension. He gestured toward the hallway with his chopsticks. So Sasuke finally asked you to pop out a few kids for him, huh? Sakura blinked. That had been blunt. She slid imperceptibly closer to Jugo. Of the three, he was the quietest. The least likely to lunge at her or make unsolicited comments about her reproductive future. Suigetsu, Jugo said, frowning. That's inappropriate. Sakura waved a hand to brush off the comment. No, it's fine. Really. She exhaled slowly and looked down at her bowl. He did ask me. Sort of. How did you know? Well, ask wasn't quite the right word. It was more like an order. We have our little birds that tell us things, Jugo explained. Here and there. Whispered rumors that are carried to our ears. Suigetsu raised an eyebrow as he shoveled more food into his mouth. And you turned him down. Damn, I wish I'd been there to see the look on his face. Suigetsu, Jugo said again, sharper this time. But Suigetsu leaned forward now, the laughter gone. His eyes had lost their mirth, replaced with something colder, calculating. Sakura felt the change instantly, a chill crawling up her spine. You know, he said quietly, it really pisses me off. Sakura stiffened. Sasuke specifically chose you, Suigetsu continued, voice flat. And you rejected him. His tone was low, his words deliberate. Jugo looked uneasy, but said nothing this time. He, too, understood the shift. Sakura met Suigetsu's gaze squarely, her heartbeat steady despite the warning flashing in her mind. He leaned in further. Even Karen, annoying as she is, knows how to take an opportunity when it's handed to her. His elbow hit the table with a dull thud as he propped himself up and grinned, predator-like. You know, he murmured, I'd really like to slice off those pretty little arms and legs of yours. Cut you into pieces. Here you screamed Sasuke's name while I. Suigetsu. The voice was calm, cold, deadly. Suigetsu froze. Sasuke stood at the entrance to the hallway, expression unreadable. Karen clung to his side, trying to fix his hair, but he batted her hand away with an annoyed flick. His gaze was fixed solely on Suigetsu. Sakura jolted to her feet, her knees shaky beneath her. I'm going to check on Naruto, she stammered, backing away. Yeah. She turned on her heel, slipping on her sandals with shaking fingers and yanking the door open before disappearing into the night. Sasuke didn't follow. Silence thickened in the room as Sasuke stepped fully into the dining area, his presence palpable. Suigetsu gave an exaggerated sigh, arms folding behind his head. I was just having a little fun. Jugo frowned, disappointed. She's our guest. Suigetsu scratched the back of his head, trying to play it off. Yeah, maybe I went a little overboard, but. He cut himself off. Sasuke's glare pinned him in place, the kind of look that promised consequences if the line was crossed again. No one spoke after that. Sakura was irritated. No, irritated wasn't the right word. She was livid. Her footsteps thundered against the rocky terrain, each one heavier than the last, leaving dents in the cracked earth as she stormed through the mountainside. The sun dipped low behind the horizon, casting long shadows over jagged cliffs. Above, The stars began to shimmer in the dusky sky. Sakura inhaled deeply, clenching her fists so tightly her knuckles turned white. Shanaru. Her voice exploded into the night, echoing through the canyon with a force that shook the air. In the distance, rocks loosened, and a mudslide tumbled down the far side of the mountain. She winced and pinched the bridge of her nose. Honestly, she could tolerate Jugo. He was quiet, respectful, and kept to himself. But Karen and Suigetsu, they were infuriating. How, just how, had Sasuke managed to stay with them for years? Karen's obsessive clinging and Suigetsu's sadistic threats had pushed Sakura to the edge. Were they the people Sasuke felt normal around? Was that the version of companionship he had chosen over Team 7? She stepped to the edge of a cliff, gazing down at the canyon she and her team had scaled earlier that morning. The narrow paths they'd climbed now looked distant and treacherous. She could still hear Sai teasing her about Karen's clinginess, his dry humor offering no real comfort during the tense journey. A pebble by her foot slipped off the ledge. She watched it bounce from ledge to ledge, the clattering sound growing fainter as it fell into the darkness below. Sakura wrapped her arms around herself and looked up. The moon was now a glowing crescent, growing brighter as the last traces of sunlight faded. She tried to get the cold away. Mind over matter, she told herself. Then a sharp gust hit her, and her teeth instantly began to chatter. Okay, she was wrong. Temperature was not just a state of mind. A sudden warmth settled around her shoulders. A dark cloak draped over her like a shield, and she didn't need to turn around to know who had joined her. Still, she looked anyway. Sasuke stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the sky, the moonlight reflecting in his eyes. He raised his hand, palm up, and slowly curled his fingers inward, like he was reaching for the crescent itself. Sakura watched him quietly. There was something different about his expression. Reflective, distant, almost haunted. Sasuke let his hand drop. The past no longer controlled him. Not anymore. He turned to her. Sakura, he said quietly. She met his gaze. Suigetsu, he began. Her lips curved into a small, tired smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. It's fine, she said. Then her smile softened, and became genuine. He cares about you. And just like that, it faded again. They all do. Sasuke said nothing. She was right. As twisted and volatile as they were, his old team had followed him without question. He hadn't deserved that loyalty, and yet, they gave it anyway. I'm glad, Sakura whispered, turning her face back to the moon. That someone was there for you, during those years. A tight pull gripped his chest. Then, she hesitated, and asked the one question that still clung to the corners of her heart. Why didn't you take me with you? Sasuke's breath caught. He hadn't expected her to say it, not after all this time. She turned to him, her eyes glistening. But her voice remained strong, steady. You chose them over us. And he had. He'd abandoned her. Abandoned Naruto. He had turned his back on everything they'd fought for. And now, standing in front of her, he had no answer. No justification. Just regret. We should go, Sakura said, her voice calm and composed. But he could see it in her, how she was holding herself together, piece by piece. We need to rest, she continued. If we want to find Hinata tomorrow. She turned, taking a step back toward the path. But Sasuke caught her hand. She stilled. For a moment, the silence stretched between them. Sakura, he began, his voice low. But the words caught in his throat. Whatever he wanted to say, needed to say, was lost. A breeze whispered between them, cool and indifferent. Sakura felt it then. That final, aching crack in her heart. And Sasuke could only stand there and watch it break. Deliberate footsteps approached, crunching loudly over the gravel to make their presence known. The two turned as Sai came into view, his face serious. Sasuke. Sakura, he said, stopping in front of them. We received a message from Shikamaru. Sakura's heart pounded. She gripped the cloak tighter. Hinata might be alive, Sai said plainly. We moved tonight. Sakura nearly collapsed from the relief that rushed through her. Alive. The word echoed in her mind like a lifeline. She straightened. She didn't have time to mourn or dwell. Her heart might be shattered, but she could walk on broken pieces. She would always move forward. All right, she said firmly, her voice cool and steady as steel. Let's do this. Sasuke didn't speak, but the sound of her voice chilled him far more than the night air ever could. Sakura's eye twitched as she trudged after Suigetsu and Jugo up the steep mountainside, each step heavier than the last. Exhaustion pressed down on her like a weighted blanket soaked through, unwanted, suffocating. She stifled a yawn and shoved off a jagged ledge with aching legs. Team Taka and Team 7 had been running on fumes all night. Between Suigetsu's endless bickering and Karen's lovesick sighs every time Sasuke so much as blinked, Sakura had barely managed a moment's peace, despite the seriousness of their mission. And the gnawing worry over Hinata's disappearance hadn't let her rest even when things were quiet. Naruto had gone with Sai, Sasuke, and Karen. Meanwhile, Sakura was paired with Suigetsu and Jugo for the second squad. A split that had raised eyebrows but made strategic sense. Sakura hadn't protested. As much as Suigetsu got under her skin, he was undeniably strong, and he wouldn't leave a teammate behind in battle. But more importantly, if Team Taka found Hinata before she did, Sakura doubted Hinata would handle that well, especially if she was in a fragile state. It would be better if at least one familiar face greeted her. Someone she trusted. But that wasn't the only reason. The real strategy came down to strength. Depending on what, or who, they were up against, each group needed a heavy hitter from Team 7. If the enemy overwhelmed Jugo and Suigetsu, Sakura could hold her own and tear them apart. And Sasuke, flanked by Karen and Sai, could do the same. She landed with a thud on top of the latest summit, exhaling sharply. Jugo stood nearby, frowning at something in his palm. Anything? She asked, stepping closer. The bug that Shino had sent with them crawled in circles across Jugo's hand, agitated and aimless, so different from earlier, when it had confidently guided their path. Jugo shook his head. No, I think the scent's gone. Sakura's brow furrowed. She pressed the communicator clipped to her collar. Sigh. Ugly, came his immediate response through the static, his voice laced with deadpan smugness. Her eyebrow twitched. She took a calming breath. How are things on your end? Not great, Karen answered before Sai could. But I'm sensing something up ahead, chakra. How far? Sakura asked quickly, already orienting herself toward their position. If I had to guess, 6 kilometers. Karen replied, voice uncertain but focused. Sakura nodded, eyes scanning the horizon until they found Karen's fiery red hair in the distance. We'll follow you. Beside her, Suigetsu caught the flicker of tension on Jugo's face and leaned in. You good? He asked. Bug giving up already? Suigetsu sneered slightly. He still couldn't believe they were relying on a bug to track Hinata. Shino had only given them 2, one for each team, in case one died in transit or got eaten by a hawk. Not exactly the most reassuring method. Jugo didn't answer right away. He just stared at his hand, brows knitting tighter. What's up? Suigetsu pressed. Don't tell me you're worried about hurting its feelings. Jugo didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he slowly opened his palm. Suigetsu took one look and recoiled. Curled between Jugo's fingers was not the insect, but a single hair, long, bloodied, and black as night. Sakura kept moving, her steps steady but her hope dwindling. They'd spent what felt like hours chasing shadows. First the bug had led them in circles before losing the trail entirely. Then Karen's chakra sensing had sparked hope, but that, too, kept slipping through her fingers like smoke. It's these mountains, Jugo had explained earlier, when Karen had nearly started tearing her hair out in frustration. They're not just for show. He'd looked over at Sakura, noting her heavy breathing and the tight line of her mouth. You've probably noticed how drained you feel. She had. Sakura wiped a bead of sweat from her brow, her hand trembling slightly as she forced the growing irritation down. Jugo was right. The mountains weren't just beautiful, they were a defense mechanism. Just like Konoha had its dense forests as a natural barrier, the rocky peaks of Tsuchi no Kuni twisted the terrain into a shinobi's nightmare. The winds shifted constantly, making scent trails unreliable, and the endless caverns distorted chakra signatures beyond recognition. Tracking anything through here was nearly impossible. She had pinned her hopes on Karen's ability to come through, but even Karen was faltering. The chakra flares vanished as quickly as they came, slipping through the crevices and folds of the land. Each time they got close enough to think they might have finally found Hinata, the signal disappeared, swallowed up by the mountain's secrets. And they couldn't afford to stumble blindly into unfamiliar territory, not with these caverns hiding who knew what in the dark. Sakura came to a halt and took a long drink from her water jug. Jugo stopped beside her, his breath calm and even. He gave her a soft smile and held up a small bottle between two fingers. Do you mind? He asked. Her gaze flicked to the capsule bottle, and she smiled tiredly. Of course not. She tossed the jug his way. Knock yourself out. Jugo caught it with practiced ease. He unscrewed the lid and shook a tablet into his palm. Are the mood stabilizers still working? She asked, watching him swallow the pill and wipe his mouth with the back of his hand. Yes, he said simply. Sakura nodded, turning to watch Karen. The redhead was scanning the peaks ahead with wild eyes, her chakra flaring with effort as she tried again and again to locate their target. Jugo stood quietly beside her, shoulders relaxed, but his mind wasn't at peace. She could tell. He had come to her after the war, seeking help. Not for a wound or an illness, but for himself. With Sasuke gone, Jugo had needed something to keep the darkness at bay. And since his affliction was more psychological than physical, Sakura had suggested mood stabilizers. What followed had been a year of experimentation, trial and error, herb combinations, chakra infusions, therapy, everything she could get her hands on. She even went so far as to consult Orochimaru's old research, digging into records with no guarantee of success. But in the end, they found something that worked. With consistency, therapy, and time, Jugo had learned to live without the constant fear of losing control. And he never forgot who had helped him do that. I wanted to apologize, he said, as they resumed their trek behind Karen. Suigetsu was out of line. Sakura glanced up at him and smiled faintly. Arigato. People were harder for Jugo than animals. He was awkward, cautious, but still kind. He handed her water back, and she took a sip before stashing it away. He looked at her again, really looked at her. They had shared something that went beyond teammates. Doctor and patient, healer and weapon, and despite everything, she had never treated him like a monster. She could have ridden him off, called for his detainment. She had that authority. But instead, she gave him the chance to heal. Jugo knew what that meant. Knew what kind of person that made her. Which is probably why what he said next weighed so heavily on him. I wanted to talk to you about the proposal from Sasuke, he said after a long pause, his voice low. Sakura's breath caught slightly, but she said nothing. Karen had been crushed, of course. Jugo remembered that night vividly. Her silence had been louder than her usual tantrums. But when she found out who Sasuke had asked, she hadn't screamed or ranted. She had simply smiled, a small, sad thing she probably thought no one saw. It had said everything. If it wasn't me, I'm glad it was her. And Suigetsu, well, he hadn't taken it as gracefully. Jugo exhaled. Sakura, he said, carefully. She turned to him. I know it's not my place, but please. Give Sasuke a chance. She looked away. That quiet sincerity in Jugo's voice unsettled her more than any argument could have. She knew how much Sasuke meant to Jugo. That had become clear during the endless hours spent working on his treatment. Jugo hadn't asked for help for himself, he'd done it so he wouldn't be a burden. So he could stand beside Sasuke without fear of losing control. Sasuke is powerful, he said as they picked their way across the rocks. But even powerful people need shields. He looked at her, eyes clear and steady. My job is to protect him, not just his life. His heart, too. Sakura blinked. Her heart skipped. Was he implying something? Jugo's orange hair fluttered in the breeze as he turned back to the path ahead. But it's hard to protect a heart when someone else already holds it, Jugo said. All I ask is that you don't break what's been given to you. Sakura swallowed, her throat dry despite the water. Sasuke hadn't really given her his heart. Not yet. Not all of it. So she said nothing. Just watched the horizon. You really care about him, huh? She asked finally. Jugo smiled faintly. I could say the same for you. She blushed, her voice a murmur. You know, I've always loved him. The confession spilled out, unplanned, but not unwelcome. Maybe it was because Jugo had been honest with her. Maybe because she trusted him in a way she hadn't realized. And I wanted to thank you, she added, turning her eyes to him. For being there for him. When I couldn't be. Jugo didn't say anything. He just gave her a quiet, knowing smile. And together, they kept moving. Orochimaru, Shikamaru drawled, his voice thick with disinterest as he stepped into the cold, sterile lab. His hands remained buried in his pockets, though his eyes never stopped moving, scanning the shelves cluttered with glass vials and half-labeled scrolls. He wrinkled his nose at the scent of chemicals. Figures he'd choose a place like this. The pale figure didn't bother to turn, continuing to pour a glowing green concoction into a narrow test tube with the same eerie calm that had always unsettled even the bravest shinobi. After the war, Tsunade had offered Orochimaru a choice: accept close surveillance from Konoha or face execution as a war criminal. To everyone's surprise, he accepted the former without protest. Whether it was curiosity or self-preservation, no one could be sure. All he asked for in return was access to a lab and permission to pursue research, medicinal cures, anti-aging techniques, and chakra studies for the good of Konoha. Tsunade had laughed the first time he submitted findings to the hospital. Sakura had been less amused. Despite his supposed redemption, Shikamaru never let his guard down. And now, with Team 8 broken and strange markings left on their bodies, markings all too familiar, he found himself dragging up the past he had hoped would stay buried. I have some questions, he said, stepping further into the lab. At last, Orochimaru turned. His gloved hands moved with theatrical slowness as he peeled them off and set them neatly aside. Ask away, he said smoothly, his voice still that same unsettling hiss, as though he found the entire situation amusing. Shikamaru didn't waste time. He pulled the photographs from his vest pocket and held them up. Do these look familiar? Orochimaru's eyes narrowed in the dim lighting. The corners of his lips curled upward in fascination as he reached out, pale fingers plucking the photos from Shikamaru's hand. He held them close, tilting them toward the light with something akin to reverence. Inuzuka Kiba, Aburame Shino, he murmured. So beautifully precise. Whoever did this wanted to send a message without delivering death. Orochimaru glanced at another image behind the photos. Ah, now this. This is familiar. Shikamaru didn't flinch. You recognize the work. How could I not? Orochimaru purred. The Ten no Juin, my curse mark. A derivative, certainly, but unmistakable. Shikamaru's jaw clenched. Orochimaru flicked his gaze back toward him, a glint of curiosity in his snake-like eyes. Nara Shikamaru, you've grown into your cleverness. No longer just the lazy genius who couldn't be bothered to care. You're one to talk, Shikamaru said dryly. A raspy chuckle escaped Orochimaru's lips. Touché. He returned his attention to the photos, tapping a long nail thoughtfully against the image of Shino's unconscious form. These wounds, the way the chakra pathways were disrupted, but not destroyed. It's not just cruelty. It's a message. Can you stop them? Shikamaru asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Orochimaru finally lowered the photos and handed them back. No, but I know Sasuke-kun has already been asked to intervene. Team 7 and Team Taka, Shikamaru said. But you already knew that. Orochimaru's grin stretched unnaturally. Yes. He must be having quite the reunion with my children. He paused, his expression turning thoughtful. Assuming Hinata-sama has been taken as well. Shikamaru's eyes flickered, but he said nothing. Then it's safe to say this isn't just a kidnapping. Orochimaru clasped his hands behind his back and began pacing. No, this is too elegant, too purposeful. If it were an enemy nation or a declaration of war, your friends would be corpses, not messages. That realization hit Shikamaru harder than he'd expected. His brows furrowed. You know who did this. Orochimaru's smile widened. I have my theories. But if you're truly seeking answers. He turned, golden eyes gleaming. You should speak with Kabuto. Shikamaru's expression darkened. You think it's him? Oh, Shikamaru, Orochimaru drawled, voice playful. Must I really spoon-feed the answers to Konoha's finest tactician? If not Kabuto, then who? Orochimaru's tone shifted, losing its amusement. I can't say with certainty. But Kabuto's journey has made him unstable in unexpected ways. He turned back to his experiment, as though the conversation bored him now. If there's anyone who knows what this mark has become, what it means now, it would be him. Shikamaru tucked the photos away, his shoulders tight with tension. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sasuke ran alongside Naruto as the narrow canyon walls closed in around them, the pale starlight casting eerie shadows across the jagged stone. Their footsteps echoed across the rocky terrain, mingling with the distant howl of wind as it swept through the mountain passes. But Sasuke wasn't focused on the terrain. He was watching Naruto. With every step, Naruto's silence grew heavier. His jaw was locked, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. And his eyes, they weren't just determined. They were dark, consumed. Sasuke opened his mouth to speak, but Naruto suddenly skidded to a halt at the edge of a sharp cliffside. He tilted his head back and shut his eyes, sucking in a breath of the dry, cold air. The scent of stone and dust filled his lungs. Hinata. He could still picture her standing in the sunlight, her dark hair swaying gently in the wind, her eyes soft and luminous, full of everything he'd ever fought for. That gentle smile she always gave him, the sound of her laughter as she called his name. Naruto-kun. His chest ached. He reached out instinctively, as though she were there, just inches away. But the illusion shattered. She was gone, swallowed by the shadows of these cursed mountains. His hand dropped to his side. He exhaled slowly, shaky and low. I'll find you. No matter what. Without another word, Naruto shouted, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A massive surge of chakra rippled outward, filling the canyon with a thick cloud of smoke. When it cleared, thousands of shadow clones stood around him, their eyes scanning the dark cliffs, the narrow ravines, the winding paths that split across the mountains of Tsuchi no Kuni-like veins. Sasuke stepped back, stunned. Naruto, what are you doing? Naruto didn't even turn. His voice was low, shaking with restrained fury. I'm done waiting. I'm going to find her myself. Sasuke's expression hardened. We're stronger together. You know that. We need to stick to the plan. Then stick to it, Naruto snapped. Track the one who took her. I'll track her. He paused, then added quietly, I can't sit still knowing she's out there, scared and alone. Naruto. Sasuke shouted, but he was already gone. Naruto and his clones shot off into the darkness, scaling cliff faces, leaping across narrow rock bridges, disappearing into the cracks and ravines of the treacherous landscape like a storm unleashed. The wind howled louder now. Sasuke stood alone in the center of the canyon, the dust still swirling from the force of Naruto's jutsu. The fire in his teammates' eyes had said everything. Nothing would stop Naruto now, not these mountains, not the night, not even the enemy waiting in the dark. Sasuke exhaled through his nose. TCH. Idiot. But even as he turned to move down a separate trail, his eyes narrowed with resolve. Because if Naruto was going to chase Hinata across the land of Earth, then Sasuke would follow. He tapped the side of his earpiece, activating his communicator. Static crackled for a brief moment before he spoke, his voice low but firm. Sigh. Karen. There was a pause as the line connected. Change of plan. We're following Naruto. Understood. Sai said as Karen said, whatever you want, Sasuke. Another click. Sakura, can you hear me? Her voice came through after a heartbeat, taut with tension. You want us to split up? Ah, Sasuke confirmed. You three track the enemy. Naruto and I will focus on finding Hinata. A short silence followed. Then Sakura's voice came again, quieter this time. Got it. Let me know when you find her. Sasuke hesitated for half a breath, his gaze flicking to the trail Naruto had taken, already miles ahead, somewhere in the winding maze of stone and shadow. And Sakura, he added, voice just barely softer over the static. Be careful. There was a pause, no words, just a gentle hum buzzing through their comms, then. You too. Sasuke cut the connection and took off, cloak whipping behind him as he launched himself down the jagged trail. The wind tore past him as he sprinted, the chill of the mountains biting at his skin, but he didn't slow. Hinata was out there, and where Naruto went, he would follow, not just as a teammate, but as a friend. One who knew all too well what it meant to lose someone, and what it meant to fight with everything to get them back. Come now, Hinata-sama, a low voice murmured, smooth and sickeningly sweet. I thought you'd have warmed up to me by now. She shuddered as the heat of his breath ghosted across the shell of her ear. We are becoming so well acquainted, after all. His fingers curled around her bare, ice-cold shoulders, their grip possessive and casual, like he had the right. Her breath caught. Her lower lip trembled, but she bit down hard, tasting copper as she forced herself to remain still. Breathe. Hinata dug deep, summoning every ounce of her training. Back in her training, they'd told her what to do if captured, how to control her fear, how to endure. No emotion, no weakness. She clenched her jaw to stop the chattering of her teeth, swallowing her rising panic. Her hands were bound. Her chakra is sealed. Her body was bruised and aching. But she was still a kunoichi. No one is around to hear you scream, the man whispered, his voice coiling around her like a serpent. And I doubt anyone would mind if I just. Oi, you do remember what he said, right? A second voice called out lazily from across the room. Hinata felt the pressure behind her shift. The man touching her stepped back slightly, but not enough. She didn't relax. She couldn't afford to. Yeah, her captor replied, annoyed. I won't touch her. A task of irritation followed. But how long do we have to keep playing along with that Sasuke's plan? Long. Bony fingers slid over her backside. She flinched, letting out a soft, involuntary gasp. You mean the monster? The other man snorted. As long as the pay keeps coming. He let out a dry laugh. And get your damn hand off her. I can see you. A beat of silence. Hinata felt the offending hand finally retreat. I just wanted a little fun. Yeah, and that'll be the last thing you ever want if he catches you. The bored voice turned sharp. Touch her again, and I won't wait for him to cut it off. Hinata fought to steady her breathing. She's just bait, the second man muttered, irritated in his tone. A damn shame, though. What do you think he's going to do when they come? Her captor asked, voice low and curious. I don't know. Kill her, maybe. Use her to mess with them first. A dark chuckle followed. Rile the fox up. Break him. Hinata focused on the rhythm of her breaths. In, out. She couldn't afford to react. Not yet. She had to wait. She's awake. By the way, the first man whispered suddenly, bending down again so she could feel the malice in his grin. She can hear everything. Is she now? Came a third voice, smooth, icy, and far too composed. Both captors stiffened. Footsteps echoed, sharp and confident. Hinata tensed. That voice wasn't one she recognized. But the reaction it drew from the others told her everything she needed to know. I thought you were on patrol, one of the men stammered. What are you doing back? The footsteps stopped just behind her. She could feel the cold gaze on her face. Are you two imbeciles finished playing your pathetic little games? The voice cut in, sharp as a kunai. We have work to do. There was a long pause, and then a breath close, too close. Hinata felt someone crouch beside her, inspecting her like one would a broken weapon. You'll want to get ready soon, he said with a chilling smile she could hear in his tone. Our guests are on their way. This was just the beginning, the real secret will unfold in the next episode. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And hit the bell icon so you'll be the first to see what happens next. See you again in the next journey of Uzumaki Empire 2.0.